Okay, so we'll start now. I'll just explain quickly to everybody that we'll do it in English, and if they can't really understand, we'll do the translation, but it's a good way for everybody to practice their English as well. Bueno, a ver, vamos a hacerlo. Richard habla un poco de español, pero me parece que si lo hacemos en inglés va a ser un poco más fluido. Así que él va a empezar con inglés. Si el Zoom va a quedar grabado, así que después lo van a poder volver a escuchar. Pero si hay algo que no entienden mucho, cualquier cosa, pongan en la barrera de mensajes, no he entendido lo que sea, y nosotros lo explicamos. Para hacer la introducción rápido en español, Richard, obviamente, abogado migratorio de Australia, ahora lo voy a saludar formalmente. Lisa es su pareja argentina que habla español, y generalmente para todo lo que son los assessments, si la persona no habla muy bien inglés, ella está ahí para actuar de traductora para lo que no entiende Richard. Pero bueno, okay, Richard, formally, I give you a welcome. Whereabouts are you? Can't see you. Okay, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time on a Sunday, especially at 7 p.m. So I explained to everybody that we'll do it in English, so it's more fluid. But if anybody can't really understand, they'll just write on the the sidebar, and they'll explain it in Spanish. But yeah, so if you want to do like a quick intro of who you are, how long you've been working, and then I'll start with my questions.
Definitely. So hi, everyone. My name is Richard Timpson. I'm a solicitor. I've been a solicitor since 1999. I'm probably showing my age a little bit by telling you that. I originally come from Ireland, so if you think I've got a bit of a weird accent, that is the reason. I've been living in Australia since around 20 years ago. And yeah, I've been practicing exclusively in immigration law since about 2008. And in addition to being a solicitor, I'm also what's known as an accredited specialist in immigration law as well. So I have a law practice here in Brisbane where we specialize solely in immigration law. So yeah, that's just a little bit around me. I guess in a personal sense, I'm sorry, Bella.
No, sorry. I was going to ask if you had to go through the immigration process yourself, because you're from Ireland, or did you move here when you were small, like young?
Yeah, no. So I guess I qualified as a solicitor in Ireland. I worked doing a lot of criminal law and things like that in Ireland. Then I moved to the United Kingdom. I worked as a solicitor there as well. And I came to Australia on the basis of a visa about 20 years ago as such. So yeah. So
you know how it feels. You know what everybody's feeling.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So for you. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, you go ahead.
I know, look, I mean, I guess when I came to Australia, I mean, as much as it's more or less a similar culture to Ireland and the United Kingdom in many senses, I guess just being from a migrant background myself, I sort of felt drawn to doing immigration law because I sort of had gone through that journey myself. So I was really interested to work in the space, and I guess to help people out, to provide them with similar opportunities to myself. I should say in a personal sense, I'm a little bit commiserating today because Ireland were beaten in the rugby last night by New Zealand.
Right, I didn't know.
Yeah. So I was awake at about 4:35 a.m. this morning to get up and watch a game where it was the quarterfinals of the Rugby World Cup. Happy to say Argentina are in the semifinals.
Yeah, we won,
Yeah, that's amazing. But look, I think it's no shame to lose to New Zealand. They have consistently been an amazing team over the years. So yeah, I guess in addition to being a lawyer, I'm also a rugby fan, and I've played a lot of rugby over the years back in Ireland and in England. I tried to play here when I came here first, but sort of getting old, you realize that you probably have to put up your boots at some point. The injuries were getting too much and that sort of thing. So yeah,
cool.
That's
I
me.
guess hopefully we will not suffer your fate next weekend because we're playing New Zealand. So I think we're playing New Zealand. So we'll see. But so for you to have an idea, so most of the people that joined today are my students. So most of them are from Argentina, Chile, Uruguay, Peru, Ecuador, Colombia. Most are overqualified. They all came initially, most came initially with the plan of, studying English. But as they're all overqualified and, they're from Latin America, the plan now is to be able to find a pathway to be able to stay.
Of course. Yeah.
Many of them already have the employers saying, oh, I want to sponsor your visa. But as you will talk through, this meet, it's not as easy as just say, like it is the case maybe in New Zealand that somebody says, I want to sponsor your visa, and then, hey, I can sponsor your visa. Here in Australia, obviously, it's more complicated, and there's some requirements that you need to fill out to be able to make it. So just for you to have an idea of, who all these students are.
Great.
I just thought we could start with, obviously, in the last few months, immigration, they're doing so many changes, supposedly positive changes. I know it's too many, but if you can, in a way, like sum up a few of the important ones that you will consider to state.
Definitely. And I might just ask before I get into it, Bella, is it okay if I share a screen with just one document that I want to show everyone, if that's right?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, amazing. So look, I guess to answer Bella's question, the position with respect to immigration over the last 18 months at this stage is really a reflection with respect to the change of government that we've experienced in Australia since around May of about a year and a half ago as such. This particular year, we have seen a steady stream of announcements with respect to, the sort of usual things that we see, such as, fee increases, a reintroduction, I guess, unfortunately for a lot of you guys, with respect to the working restrictions concerning student visas, a broadening of the capacity of people on 485 visas to stay longer, and things like that. We're also seeing a lot of restrictions eased with respect to making, New Zealanders more easily able to get citizenship, much more than was the case previously. I guess for me, the biggest change that's occurred so far, and probably the way that I can characterize your question, Bella, is that we haven't seen all of the changes yet. I think by the end of the year, we're really going to see significant further changes that hopefully will make it much easier for you guys with respect to having options longer term as well, and I'll talk about that in a second. But I guess the biggest change for me personally in terms of my practice is just a reflection of the document that I'm going to share now, so just bear with me for 2 seconds.
Sure, no worries.
And hopefully this will work. If you just bear with me. Okay. Okay, so can you see this document here?
Yeah, it's coming up. Hang on, not yet. Oh, yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so apart from, sort of relatively moderate changes that were announced from about July of this year, approximately 4 to 5 weeks ago, we received notification from the Department of Home Affairs with respect to certain what we call nomination ceilings for each of the relevant visas. What is really significant from my perspective is if you look over towards the right column, we'll see a program known as the Business an investment and innovation program. So those are the sort of mainstream investment type arrangements. People who want to set up businesses here in Australia, people who are wanting to make financial investments and things like that. So the government hasn't closed off the visas themselves, but they've basically allocated a nil quota. And that's reflected in the right-hand column on this document here. So basically, we don't realistically have a subclass 188 program for this financial year, just because of the so I mean there's
no 188, so the entrepreneur, it will not be for the next financial year.
Yeah, so every, and this document reflects the quota that has been provided to each state and territory government in Australia that has a program that interfaces with the federal government. So such as the 491 program, the 190 program, the 188 program. So for the business innovation aspect of those arrangements, there's a nil quota provided by the federal government to each of the state and territory. So basically what that means is, I don't think it'll affect you guys, but for anyone that was wanting to, perhaps make an investment or set up a business, a larger business in Australia, those programs have effectively been curtailed for this financial year.
Oh,
So
wow.
that for me was the really big one. Now that's not to say that there isn't any other options, and I'll talk about that sort of later on in the session. But I think in addition to that, in the first two columns there, we'll see the subclass 190 visa program and the subclass 491 visa program. So both of those are state and territory nominated permanent and visa programs. So what was really surprising to everyone in this space a couple of weeks ago was the reduced amount of quota that was provided to each of the states and territories for these two particular programs for this financial year. Okay, now I have to say this, that as much as these are just the quotas for this financial year, depending on where you are in the study cycle, it probably won't affect you in the sense that by the time that we would want to exercise options down the track, we'll be into a new financial year anyway, and the program size will hopefully increase in due course anyway. So this is just what it's like for this financial year up until the 30th of June of 2024. Okay.
Yeah.
But as we can see, like, it's a different situation for each of the states and territories. Like, we look at Queensland, for example. So Queensland, for sort of tables down, has a quota of 900 nominations for the purpose of the 190 visa this year, only 650 for the purpose of the 491 visa. And you compare that then to, New South Wales, 2,650 versus 1,500. So I think, if people are making decisions longer term around, where do I need to go? Where is a destination for me that's going to give me the greatest capacity in which to get sponsored by a state or territory government? We just need to look at the figures from a quota perspective and say, well, in a general sense, New South Wales and I think Victoria have probably the more generous of the programs in terms of an allocation. So I think, statistically, we're probably more likely to get invited there.
And this
right,
is more, sorry, but
yeah,
this is state nomination. It's completely different to what, being nominated by your employer.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I'll just quickly say this in Spanish because it's very important. Because obviously, what I've seen, you see how, say, the government of Tasmania says, okay, how they brought up this special program, so you have more chances of being nominated. Like last year was the case with South Australia, and so everybody went to South Australia, and then South Australia reduced the quota, and then people are like, okay, what do we do now? And I can see now that many of my students are contacting me saying, I want to go to Tasmania because of the same reason. And what I say to them is that you need to think that there is a 600. What's the quota for Tasmania?
Yeah, look, I mean,
600.
Yeah, and we're like, how many people are on this meeting? 600 is not a lot of numbers. That's nationwide. That's a super small program. And if you compare, and people in Queensland will probably hate me for saying this, but the most progressive of the state and territory programs are probably Tasmania, South Australia. Victoria is really good as well, but at the same time, we have to be realistic and say, what is the reality of us getting invited if we move to those places? Now, in a general sense, it makes absolute sense that we would maximize our prospects of accessing these programs where we live in a regional or designated area. But we're still caught by the reality that the state government is restricted by virtue of the numbers that it has received from the federal government. So I would say, and I'll talk separately about employer nominated, that's not subject to these restrictions. Living in a regional area makes sense, but obviously we just need to be alive to the reality of the limitations of these quotas because, we're competing against everybody else that's also looking for the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously the highest points that you score, the more chances that you have, but you also need to see of what is a priority, what skills are a priority in that region. So I'll just quickly say that in Spanish and then you can continue. En sí lo que estamos hablando, que asumo que la mayoría entendió, pero por si acaso, es esto que mucha gente me está contactando últimamente diciéndome, como pasó el año pasado, ok, hay más chances de poder conseguir una residencia en South Australia. Ahora todo el mundo se quiere ir a Tasmania, pero lo que tienen que ver es que esto que está explicando él es para ser nominado por un estado, no es para ser nominado por un employer, por un empleador. Siempre por ahí el camino más rápido para lograr como varios años de estadía es más rápido y más fácil haciéndolo con un empleador, cuando el que te nomina es un empleador. Lo que está explicando él es la parte de cuando te nomina el Estado, que ahí es cuando él dice, que es lo que yo siempre explico, que no solamente porque ahora hay más chances de ir a Tasmania, si se ponen a fijar, él está diciendo, en este momento hay 60 personas conectadas en el Meet. ¿Cuántos lugares hay para Tasmania? 600. Y vos estás compitiendo con gente que está en toda Australia, millones de inmigrantes que están en toda Australia. Entonces, te dice, sí, tiene sentido irte a una zona regional, pero también hay que ser realista que las chances de poder ser nominados son mucho más complicadas si vos te basás en la subclase 190, 491 y vas a una región con el objetivo de que ese estado te nomine, porque cuanto más puntos tenés, más chances vas a tener, pero estás compitiendo con millones de personas. Y si ustedes miran, esos son los lugares que por este año financial year, como dicen en Australia, este año financiero, o sea, que termina el 30 de junio, estos son los lugares. Entonces, eso él va a seguir explicando, pero creo que es importante que lo tengan en cuenta porque mucha gente me está diciendo, me voy a mudar al medio de la nada porque ahora salió un programa de prioridad. En sí lo que le está diciendo es, hay que ser también realistas y que por ahí, el camino más complicado. Yo creo que el camino más fácil sería el de employer. Okay, you can go ahead. Otherwise,
yeah, and I think I understood that in terms of what you were saying, Bella. But I think one of the things that we need to really understand is that it always makes sense based on the design of the programs at the moment to consider living in a regional area, because many of the state and territory governments, even if we have lower numbers, will still prefer candidates that have been living in a regional area and working in a regional area for a period of time. I also think it's super important that we don't just assume, you know, that Tasmania is the best destination or South Australia or Victoria. We need to assess it on a case-by-case basis. So, you know, for example, the way New South Wales works is that they have a 491 program. It's probably the biggest program in a general sense between 190s and 491s, but they have a very region-specific 491 program, and each of the regions in New South Wales has their own occupations and requirements. So, like, if any of the guys that are listening are sort of considering a move with a view to maximising prospects down the track, I'm really happy to have a chat with them offline, just with a view to curating a strategy specifically, because where we would recommend they go will depend on their own individual circumstances around their education and, you know, what their skill set is and things like that. It's not just everyone go to Tasmania, like we need
exactly,
to.
Yeah. Which I see, that's why I kept saying it, because it's what I saw happening in the past 18 months. It was the case with South Australia, because obviously you also see all some agents saying, you know, making videos saying, okay, now you should go to South Australia, and then everybody goes, and I can see that this is happening now with Tasmania, and that's why I keep saying to my students, it's a good thing to speak with someone like a professional like yourself that will assess your profile and based on what your skills are, maybe suggest the best place to go to. So, yeah.
Okay, perfect. And, you know, I don't want anyone to be disheartened by these numbers. These are only current numbers. Basically, the way that I would describe the system at the moment is that it's a system in transition. Okay, the government has indicated consistently over the last year and a half that it's going to increase the size of the migration program. I think how they've treated other programs is going to be representative of the fact that there will be other options and more options down the track other than these programs as well. And we do expect the programs that I'm talking about at the moment, the 190 and the 491, to get more quota. We do expect that there will be a reinstigation of the investor programs as well down the track as well. So, it's
sorry. No, you go.
Yeah, so I'm just saying, look, that this is just probably the biggest change for me so far this year. It was really, a lot of people were very surprised by the fact, particularly that they didn't give any quota whatsoever for 188 visas for this year. The government has wanted to change the settings of the 188 program for some time. 188 program, guys, is a visa that allows investors from overseas to come in and set up businesses and make investments and stuff like that. We don't think that the zero quota reflects the closure of the program. The program hasn't closed, it's just they're not taking on new applications. We expect a new program next year or a similar program. They're just going to redesign it, I think, is probably the way I would look at it. So I guess that's one major change. But I think the biggest change that will happen, that hasn't happened yet, and I think this is probably the area that most of the people here today can probably take the most heart from, is that we do expect really significant changes, hopefully within the next couple of months, with respect to the skilled program in an overall sense, and particularly the employer nominated program. So at the moment, we have this program where, people access employer nominated arrangements under, subclass 494 visas, subclass 482 visas, subclass 186 visas. It's complicated. It's very disjointed. It's difficult for people to understand and all that sort of stuff. So the government has consistently said that the system that they've inherited, they were going to simplify. So instead of having a situation where on the 482 visa, for example, only certain people can transition to permanent residency, the change that we expect by Christmas is that every person on a 482 visa will be able to transition to residency, permanent residency, under the auspices of 186 visa.
Sorry, so you said the 482 and?
So a 482 and a 494 are the main temporary visas that are used to employ persons. So if any of you guys were looking to be sponsored or nominated by an employer here in Australia, those are generally the two main mechanisms that we use from a visa perspective to bring people in and to keep people here. There's a transition point to permanent residency from both of those visas, but for the 482 process, which is probably the most popular one, there's only a restricted cohort that can actually proceed to permanent residency at the moment, but that is going to change. And basically what the government is saying is that everybody that will be on a 482 visa will be able to transition to a 186 visa. Yeah.
I'll just quickly explain that in Spanish.
Thank you.
Lo que está diciendo es que las visas más populares, lo que hablamos anteriormente, la 190 y 491, es cuando sos esponsoreado, o sea, nominado por el Estado. Entonces, las visas de trabajo más populares, que es la mayoría que viene con la visa de estudiante, que trata de lograr, es la 482 y la 494. Lo que está tratando de hacer el gobierno ahora, los cambios que se esperan que pasen, es que vos puedas transicionar directamente de una 482, so usually it's like 2 or 3 years with a 482.
Yeah, generally 3 years, Bella, but they're bringing that down to 2 years as well.
Yeah, because I had a few students that got it 2 years. So estas visas, generalmente la 482 y la 494 te dan 2 o 3 años de permiso de trabajo. Entonces, el cambio que inmigración quiere hacer, que se está esperando que se haga, porque creen que el sistema está roto y es muy complicado, es que vos puedas transicionar más rápido de una 482 a una 494. Estas dos son las visas más populares para salir de esa visa de estudiantes y lograr una visa de trabajo, que es la que todo el mundo está interesado, así que es lo que nos vamos a enfocar ahora, que si bien depende de cada posición laboral, va a tratar de darnos unas líneas generales de qué es lo que tendrías que cumplir con estas. So I'm just saying that obviously the requirements that you need to fill depends on the occupation, and obviously, you'll try to explain in a way what are the most important requirements that you could say that you need to suffice in order to be able to apply for these visas.
Yeah, definitely. So look, from the point of view of what is also really major change that I've seen over the last 6 months in particular is with respect to how the government is dealing with 482 visas in particular. Okay, so 12 months ago or 3 months ago, those were much more difficult visas to get across the line. It would take between 8 to 12 months if you were lucky, in which to get a decision previously under the old government. Now it's the case that we're getting decisions within 2 to 3 weeks. And the processing by the department is a lot less strenuous than it used to be previously. So I think that hopefully bodes well for the future in terms of you guys potentially accessing those applications. So in a general sense, I'll talk about the 482 visa first. So the 482 visa is a visa that's not affected by any of these quotas. It's an employer-nominated visa that we think by Christmas will have a transition point to permanent residency for all applicants. Okay, so from your perspective, the way the system is designed at the moment is that it's occupation specific. So if you have an employer that's willing to nominate you in a position for an occupation that's on a specific list, we can access a 482 visa. So the main thing from your perspective is, do you have a suitable qualification and experience? Do you have the necessary standard of English to be able to access that program? And there's other things like health and character and things like that. I think.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, you go, Bella, sorry.
No, I was going to say, so, and in regards to the employer, that employer needs to be registered. Like, it needs to be registered. Yeah, so it's not that anybody that has a company decides to sponsor you. It's not, they can't do that. They need to be registered. Can you explain a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, so at present, the 482 visa program is a 3-step process, okay? So the last step, which is the visa application, is made by you guys in the event of an application. The first 2 steps are applications that are made by the Australian or the overseas employer to access that program, okay? So I guess from the point of view of getting the employer approved as a sponsor, I mean, effectively what we need to prove is that the employer here in Australia is registered and is trading and, generally has a good history with respect to its operation in Australia. There's a specific process. We make an application. It takes about a week in which to get approved. It's not difficult by any means.
Okay.
Sorry,
cool.
What's that?
No, that's great. That's great.
Yeah, no, it's not difficult.
Cool.
And it doesn't matter about the size of the business. It doesn't matter about, a lot of employers say to me, oh, well, I'm not really profitable, or I'm not making too much money, or I only have a team of 2 or 3. Like, there's no restrictions on turnover for the 482 program. There's no restrictions on the size of the team. It can be a 1 to 2 business arrangement, 1 to 2 person business for it to be approved. Like, it doesn't have to be a massive entity or anything like that.
Cool. So that's the first step. Maybe we'll go step by step so that people understand. So the first step, obviously, that business needs to be registered and approved by immigration. Entonces, el primer paso para la 482, vamos a ir paso a paso para que se entienda, es que la compañía, la empresa que te quiera sponsorear, tiene que estar registrada y aprobada por inmigración. Pero Richard está diciendo que si no está aprobada, hoy en día no te piden, no es un proceso largo, se puede hacer relativamente rápido, puede ser una empresa chica, no hace falta mostrar que está como generando cierta cantidad de dinero. Entonces, ese es el primer paso, ¿no? Que te quieran dar el sponsor y que esa empresa esté aprobada y registrada bajo inmigración. Okay, that's the first one.
That's the first one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay, my employer said, hey, yeah, let's go ahead, let's do this. What's the next one, the next important step?
Yeah, and just remember, you don't need to apply progressively. In other words, like, we can do all 3 applications at the same time. So it's not that we need to have the first one in place to go to the second, so forth.
Cool.
So the second stage then is the nomination. So effectively the nomination is getting the department's approval to fill the position in the employer's business with an overseas worker, okay? There's probably 3 main issues with that, okay? The first is, does the employer have a position on a list of occupations that's suited for this visa program? Can we prove that the employer has a genuine need in which to employ the person in this visa program? is the salary going to be at a certain level for the purpose of this program? And we also have to do what's called labor market testing, probably there's 4 actually, things to make sure that there's no Australians available to fill.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much it. There's a bit more to it than that, but I mean, in a general sense, that's what we need to
and
do.
now I think that the salary, the threshold is now over 53,000, right? And they need to pay you more than 53,000 a year.
Yeah, it's now 70, but so it depends on the sector. So we think that one of the major changes that's going to be coming, hopefully in the next few weeks, is that they're going to basically scrap the current system and have 3 different tiers of salary thresholds by which it will be possible to access the program. And depending on the tiers of remuneration, they will process applications much quicker as such. So we understand the changes are going to be that there's going to be a tier at around $50,000. There will be a tier at around $70,000 to $90,000, and then a third tier at $150,000. What's going to be, I think, really good in terms of the changes, and the government announced this in May, is that they're going to move away from a very restrictive occupations list and allow a lot more occupations in on that lower threshold in the care industry. So, you know, occupations in early childhood education, aged care, disability care as well, we think will be able to come into the programs much easier. So I think if any of you guys are working in those sectors, I think there's going to be some really great opportunities coming up for you.
Cool. And they still need to like advertise the position for, say, like a month and see if the Australian,
right.
is it a month?
Yeah, so it's 4 weeks. Look, it's a lot of people think, oh, you know, how are we going to succeed and meet that requirement? I mean, basically, if your employer thinks that you're still the best person for the job, even if we get 10 Australians applying for the position, it's still the commercial decision of the employer to make the decision to employ you and nominate you for this. So it's a bit of a joke. The process would be the way that I would characterize it, but it's a process that we have to go through nonetheless.
But it's the same in New Zealand. It's the same that you need to prove, and obviously you're always the best candidate. That's why they're sponsoring your visa.
Yeah, definitely, you know. And look, the department doesn't be the one to step in, Bella, and say, no, you shouldn't be employing this person because we think this Australian person, like I do a lot of these applications. You know, sometimes employers get 250 applications from Australians because they're just making the applications for, you know, social welfare purposes because they have to make the application. So it's to stay, you know, and that sort of thing. So look, it is a requirement. We need to respect that. But nonetheless, like, it's not a major issue provided it's done right.
So I'll just explain that. So el primer paso es el que explicamos. El segundo paso, que la empresa esté registrada. El segundo paso, el más importante, es que se pueda comprobar de que, bueno, vos tenés que tener una ocupación que está en la lista de ocupaciones que dentro de esa 482, de esa visa 482 o de la 424, y después tu empleador tiene que justificar de que vos sos una persona genuina y que no hay ninguna persona australiana que pueda cumplir esa posición. Entonces, sí o sí, hay un stage que tu empleador tiene que postear la posición laboral, que es la tuya, para ver quién aplica. Y después él tiene que decir, ok, te elijo, o sea, creo que vos igualmente sos la mejor persona, a pesar de que todos estos australianos aplicaron. Pero hay que hacer eso porque inmigración te dice que en realidad siempre hay que darle prioridad, por así decirlo, al australiano. Pero es como que más una formalidad, porque se supone que tu empleador está haciendo todo este proceso para que vos puedas sacar el sponsor. Así que esa es otra cosa, otro punto importante dentro del proceso. Okay, and now we're getting to the, I guess, the hardest part. In a way, which obviously it depends on the occupation. But English, the English language requirement. I mean, obviously, it's not for every occupation, because I've got a student from, he's a tennis player, and he got a 482 as a tennis player, tennis coach. And he didn't need to submit any language requirements. But I guess, would you say that for most, you need at least 5.5 in IELTS? Would you say?
Yeah, no, so I wouldn't say, well, pretty close to that. So 5.
5.0.
Yeah, so it depends on the stream. So at the moment, we've got like a 482 program that's fragmented. We have a short-term stream and we have a medium and long-term stream. So the short-term stream, the English language requirements are a little bit less. So we need to have an average of 5 with not less than 4.5 in an IELTS test in each of the 4 test categories. In the medium to long-term stream, it's a little bit higher, so it's 5 in each of the 4 test categories. But obviously, there's Pearson and there's loads of different tests that we can take as well. It is also possible to get exemptions from English language depending on passports, depending on occupations, also depending on salary and depending on the type of, on occupations as well. So I think in a general sense, if you guys are studying, and I don't need to tell you this, I'm sure you're completely alive to it, but English is definitely one of the most important things that you can focus on in terms of making this work for you. What's interesting from a 482 perspective is that English is not a time of application requirement, unlike other visas. So it's something that we would need to get before we would get a decision on the visa as such. So we have a little bit of time up our sleeves, but obviously we want to make sure that we're comfortable they're going to meet that requirement, to be approved with the visa as such. And I think, I'll talk in a few minutes about what I think you could be doing to maximize your prospects, but definitely with changes that we think are coming, and we think that most of the government's focus is going to be on this particular space, that if we can focus on kind of like 3 things, it'll maximize your prospects in terms of being able to get permanent residency. And that would be English, getting your qualifications, getting your experience is super important as well. And really focusing on those things. And obviously, if you have an employer, that's always really important to, see what their attitude would be and, to try and work to a situation where they might be, in a position to nominate or sponsor you in due course is always really important too.
Which I think it's much easier now. Like maybe 5 to 10 years ago, Australians didn't even know what it was like to sponsor someone.
Yeah,
and now,
absolutely.
You would have to come and beg your employer to, hey, would you do it? And now it's like they come on to you saying, hey, I want you to stay, I'll sponsor your visa. Definitely.
And look, in my experience, in the last 12 to 18 months since COVID, the bubble has kind of burst with respect to Australian employers' capacity and willingness to consider those things. They've basically got a situation at the moment that the skills situation is so acute that they've got really no option but to access these programs where they can. So there's much more of a willingness from an employer perspective, in my experience, to access the 482 and the 494 program. And also, and this will be helpful for you guys as well, they're also quite happy to pay for a lot of the process too, which they sort of have to as well. So, that might be a win-win down the track for you too, so. Yeah.
So just before we move on to the next one, so in regards to exemption on the English language requirement, obviously it's not for every occupation, especially those in the health industry.
Yeah.
But would you say it's in trades? Would it be much easier to get that exemption? I know most people will be like, hey, I want to go, like I know they'd be interested in the exemption part of the English language requirements.
Yeah. So
can you think of, obviously, again, there's so many occupations, but could you think of like an occupation that you would say, or I know you could get an exemption on this one? Can you think of?
Yeah, well, for example, we can get an exemption on every occupation in circumstances where the nominating sponsor is an overseas business that's looking to position someone into Australia where the salary is in excess of a certain amount. So there's an across the board exemption from English in those circumstances. There's an exemption from English in circumstances where someone has studied through English as well, which might be relevant to you guys as well. In terms of trade occupations, it's a little bit difficult because a lot of the trade-based occupations are licensed trades and we need English to do that. It kind of depends on what the requirements are from a licensing perspective to be able to do it. But yeah, so look, there's about 7 or 8 exemptions, Bella.
But I guess it's a case by case.
Look, unfortunately it is, but say, for example, we have a business from, Argentina, for example, that was looking to set up here with a view to growing its market in Australia. The Argentinian business is able to nominate for the 482 programs, and not many people know that, but we can definitely do it. And where we're bringing in team from, say, Argentina or Latin America for the purposes of that arrangement, there's an English language exemption where the salary is over a certain amount as such. So, you know, like it depends on the circumstances, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, and where people are educated here as well, there could be an exemption where the instruction has been conducted through English. And I think, you know, look.
No, sorry, but if there is a language requirement, you cannot, and you don't comply with that requirement, you cannot apply for that visa, or you can't have that visa granted, correct?
Yeah, so you can apply for it, but unfortunately the visa won't be approved because it's what's called a time of decision requirement. So by the time the department makes the decision on the application, you need to have satisfied the English language requirement. So, you know, I mean, I guess I wouldn't recommend anyone lodging an application and seeing whether they get English. Because it would be a big risk. It's not like other visas, you know, like a 485 where we need to have English as a time of application requirement. It's not. A 482 is different. But I think, you know, the most important thing in a general sense is for people to work on the English, you know, benchmark yourself to see where you're at with it. I think you can do test IELTS and Pearson sort of relatively cost effectively. You know, getting your English up to speed, immersing yourself in the community here with a view to speak English as much as possible is really going to resonate in terms of being able to meet that requirements. It's not too bad. I mean, I think most people will eventually get it. It's not as high as, say, competent English. It's just a 5 or an average of 5 with 4.5 in each of the 4 test categories at the moment. So
I guess the most important message here is, they should study English. And even though you might be able to apply for an exemption, it's important that if for that occupation and for that subclass you need the English language requirement, your visa will not get granted unless you fill out that requirement. I think that's the most important message, I guess.
For everyone to take home, that's definitely the most important message. I guess, you know, if you'd like to know more about an exemption, it's very case specific. I'm more than happy to, you know, have that chat with anyone offline. I think we'll share our email or something at some point, so you can reach out and we can have that discussion. But as a general kind of sense,
and for the, just answering to Marco's question, for the partner, the language requirement is not important. For the skill, for the temporary, for the employer nomination, it's not a requirement, right?
So for a secondary application on a 482, absolutely. We don't need to do that.
But it will be important for the for an event like a permanent residency. So, you know, just say hypothetically down the track, you succeed with a 482 at this stage, and then say after 2 years we proceed to a 186 application. It will still be at the moment a time of application requirement for you to have what's known as competent English at the time of application. Nancy,
But for the secondary applications, there's no English language requirement other than a requirement to have functional English at the time they make a decision. Functional English is relatively low. If we don't meet that requirement, we can pay an additional fee. But it's like, I think everyone should be able to get through it reasonably easy. They can assess it on the basis of an interview as well, and things like that.
Cool. I'll just quickly explain this in Spanish, and then I'll let you move on to another area that's very important for everybody is in regards to the work experience onshore and offshore in order to be able to apply for one of these visas. So I'll just quickly explain. Entonces, en líneas generales, por si alguno no entendió, si bien para ciertas visas se puede pedir una excepción del inglés y no hace falta presentar el inglés, en algunos casos, en la gran mayoría de los casos, si te piden el inglés, vos podés hacer la aplicación de la visa de una 482 o 494 sin el requisito de inglés. Pero en el momento que se tome la decisión, si es un requisito tener el inglés y vos no tenés el inglés, no te pueden aprobar la visa. Así que como mensaje importante, es súper importante el tema del inglés. En la mayoría de las visas el requisito es 5.0 para arriba, como mínimo 5.0, por ende ninguna banda más baja de 4.5. Es relativamente bajo, pero es importante que el mensaje sea que sí o sí el inglés es importante. El inglés de la pareja para una visa de trabajo temporaria no es esencial, lo más probable es que para una residencia permanente. Pero bueno, va a depender de el momento que apliquen, cuáles son los requisitos. El IELTS generalmente tiene una duración de 1 o 2 años, creo que son 2. Y depende de qué propósito, para cuál sea el propósito, si te aceptan, por ejemplo, para la postgraduate visa, te aceptan que sea los últimos 3 años, un examen que hayas hecho en los últimos 3 años. Pero bueno, de vuelta, depende de la subclase que apliques. Pero lo importante que tienen que saber es que es muy importante el idioma si su objetivo es quedarse en Australia a largo plazo. Okay, so, next. So the work experience,
Yeah.
I'm not going to get into the registration part because I think that's going to be a bit complicated. So for instance, for engineers that they need to be registered,
Yeah.
or nurses, or, you know, depending on, like, some occupation is a bit hard, but
Yeah.
in regards to, which is a bit confusing for some, so your employer wants to sponsor you, they
Yeah.
are registered, you've got the English language. Now, the experience,
Yes.
what experience is necessary?
Okay. So it depends on the visa that we're talking about. So if we're talking about an employer-nominated visa, we're looking
employer-nominated, yeah.
mainly at this stage, because, you know, there's like points-tested visas and we get points for work experience, all that sort of stuff. So from a 482 visa perspective, there's a general requirement that we have 2 years of work experience. For the 494 visa program, it's 3 years. Okay. Let me talk about the 482 first. Okay. So how should I put this? There's a very, very loose interpretation from a government perspective in relation to what they will accept for the purposes of meeting that 2-year requirement. Okay. From your perspective, if you're here in Australia, I think it's really important that we try and get as much experience within the confines of the conditions of your visa at the moment, that are relevant to the occupation that you might be nominating in due course. I understand, you know, people need to do different things, but where we can use the time that we have here to try and build up that experience, that is really, really important from your perspective. Okay, so from a legislative point of view, it's a 2-year experience requirement. However, under policy, we can actually use the period of study as well to make up that period. So, you know, sometimes where we don't have 2 years experience, it can still be possible for us to amalgamate the study as well as the work experience, where there's a lower work experience period in which to meet the requirement, and that's absolutely fine. You know, it depends on the circumstances. You know, we can definitely use experience from overseas that's relevant. Even if the experience overseas isn't in exactly the same occupation, we can argue that there's certain, you know, consistencies between occupations. I think the most important thing is to, you know, have an open mind with respect to the full extent of your experience base, that, you know, some of you guys will have done really amazing and incredible work overseas, and we want to be losing that by any measure. So it's important that, you know, whoever's talking to you, and I'm certainly happy to discuss these things with you offline, that, you know, we fully understand the full breadth of your work experience, because you could have things from back home that are really relevant for the purpose of a future application. And just remember as well, that where a lot of you are studying here, that's really interesting, because we can actually, under policy, use that period to, you know, to sometimes make up the 2-year requirement for the purpose of the 482 visa. For the 494 visa, it's a little bit different. It's a little bit tighter in terms of how they interpret it. But generally, we would need 3 years experience, and it's usually post-qualification experience for that. The problem with the 494 visa is it's more of a regional visa than a 482. A 482 probably is a better way of proceeding in a general sense, I think, would be the way that I would look at it based on the changes that are coming as well.
But it is a 2-year work experience requirement. And in regards to the amount of hours, because obviously for some states it's like 20 hours a week, for some it's 30 hours a week. what could you say in regards to that? Because obviously
Yeah.
most people here are on a student visa, now restricted to 24 hours a week. So, and also the fact that a lot of people come here and they start working doing something completely different to what they did before. Like, for instance, on Friday, I got a call from one of my students' employer, and he said to me, I love him, I want to sponsor his visa. And I was like, okay. And I was like, and he was like, I was like, what's the business like? What do you guys do? And he's like, it's a plumbing business. And I was like, but he was a policeman back home. So he's only been doing plumbing work for 3-4 months. So obviously there's no way to, suffice that 2-year requirement.
Well, there could be. It depends on the qualification that they have. So
they don't have anything related to that, because obviously they're
I see. Okay,
something completely different.
Okay. So if it was the case that they were here, say, doing a certificate 3 in plumbing, we could potentially use the period of that course partially towards making up that 2-year requirement as such. So that would depend on that situation in terms of what else would be in terms of qualifications. But yeah, so the position with the states is for a different visa program. So some states, for the 190 or the 491 visa program, view full-time work differently. Some say 20 hours, some say 30. It's super confusing. For the 482 visa program, generally they will view 30 hours a week as being full-time work. Now, just bear in mind that 30 hours of work can be prorated over a longer period. So if it's the case that you only have part-time work of 20 hours, we actually look over the period of your employment history, even overseas. And if we can amalgamate or compact that down into 2 years, it's often the case that we can meet the requirements that way as well. So the thing is, anything can be argued, Bella, so if it's the case that there's 25 hours a week that we've been doing, if we can show that across that 25 hours that it was the equivalent to full-time work, there's a scope, obviously, to argue that they meet the requirements anyway. But I think, bringing in someone's broader-based experience is really important, just to see, even if the job titles were different, were there any consistencies between what the nominated role is and what they were doing previously, and seeing whether we can get 2 years out of it. And it's often the case that we can. So, again, it's on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The policy is really loose when it comes to 482s in relation to what constitutes full-time work. I've done plenty of applications for international students that have been able to transition directly to 482 visas where they have been subject to that restriction. So it's just, I think we need to be open-minded about it. It's perfectly permissible to do it. It's just a case of looking really focused on what the whole work experience was and seeing whether we can get 2 years out of it of relevant employment experience, and we often can.
So I guess in a way it's pretty flexible, and we're expecting more flexibility in the next 2 months.
Absolutely.
And I think the most important message here is it's a case-by-case case. And the most important thing is to talk to someone as experienced as you, to analyze each situation and then see what their options are. From what you're saying, there's a lot that can be done. So I think that's pretty important, and it's pretty positive.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, the biggest metaphor in immigration is that, like, we're all different humans. Everyone brings their own, strengths and weaknesses to a particular position, and we need to look at everyone's situation, individually, and, telling 1,000 people that they need to go to Tasmania, that's just, every case is different. And I think it's important to curate a strategy that's particular to you, that can make it work for you, so that you can sort of fulfill these dreams and be able to stay here. And I think, things are going to change, are changing, and, hopefully the changes that will come really quickly will make it even easier, I think, from a longer term perspective, for you to be able to stay based on the studies that you're doing. And that's, I think, really fantastic and great for the country as well.
Yeah. So would you say just one last question before maybe I'll get people the chance to ask a few questions before we let you go. But
it's okay.
would you say, I always tell my students that what's important is that you have the skills, or you get to study here what Australia wants, what Australia needs, because that might make your path a bit easier. Would you agree with that? Would you say, because I've got a lot of people, like, for instance, I don't know if she's online at the moment, but I've got a student that she's qualified. She's got a degree in advertising.
Okay.
She managed to get a job in a hospital. She started working in hospitality, and then got a job in a hospital in the admin area, which was an amazing thing for her.
Okay.
And now she just had a meeting with a lawyer, and the lawyer said to her, study to be a chef, do something completely different, because whatever you did is not really worth it here in Australia. So, and I said to her, do you really want to be a chef? Do you really, want to go that? Because if you study to be a chef, you need to work as a chef in order to do your immigration pathway. And if you don't like it, it's no point doing it. Would you agree with that? Would you say that because she did advertising and she worked in a bank, it's impossible for her to do something in that area here in Australia?
Yeah, look, I've come across so many people over the years that, have signed up to do great courses, but at the end of the day, they didn't have, I don't know, like a love in their heart for what they're studying. And, like, it's hard enough to study, but let alone go through a career when you don't really like what you're doing. You need to like it, because it's hard enough to get through studying without that. If people really want to do hospitality jobs, hospitality is absolutely fine, but it's difficult in terms of the demands on you in relation to hours and split shifts and all that sort of thing. And some people really love it, and that's totally cool. But for that person, I'm obviously not aware of all the circumstances, but I absolutely wouldn't discount someone with a background in advertising or marketing or banking. There's a range of different options that we could look at for that person. And I think it's an education choice is really, really important from the view of maximizing your prospects. And I know you're doing really great work in that respect, Bella, but I think, not discounting as well what experience you have, and to see how valuable that is also really important, and not to kind of sell yourself short by saying, well, I have to do this to be able to get permanent residency. There's so many options for different non-hospitality, non-trade roles that we can also look at. And I think, before you make a decision to study something, it's important to understand all of your options,
Yeah, exactly. Okay, perfect. So I'm just going to let people ask you a few questions.
Yeah.
In regards to Leandra's question, it's what you already said. He wants to know if he's going to be able to submit his English certificate from the school where he just studied for a skill visa. But like you said, it will depend exactly. He's an engineer, so I guess it will depend on his case. I guess you will have to analyze the whole situation. So maybe Lisa, if you can write down Richard's email address and phone number. I guess it's better the email address for people to be able to contact him directly afterwards. But for those that raise their hand, I'll give this amazing woman, Vero, she's an amazing, amazing mom. I'll give her the chance to ask you a question. Vero?
Hola.
Hi.
Hello, Richard.
Hi, how are you? Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. I have to ask in English, or
You gotta practice your English.
You can practice your English, but if it's too complicated, then maybe do it in Spanish. But try.
Okay. I'm trying. Okay, I am operating theater technician. That occupation is in the list in South Australia. I am living in Adelaide now.
Okay.
But I'm planning to apply for the 491.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if I still can apply. I don't know because they changed the requirement, so I don't know if I still continue with that. But also, if I open the window, I don't know, for the recruitment, they mention higher skilled.
Yeah.
And I open the recruitment, and I think I am able to apply that, but I don't know.
Yeah, and look, what I would say to you, I mean, I'd love to have a look at your situation. I probably don't want to be discussing exactly everything about your situation in front of everybody else, but I'm really happy to take, your information on notice. South Australia does have a really good program. I think it's one of the most progressive programs in the country. It has 3 different streams to attract people in, and there's, a graduate stream for people that have studied there. There is a highly skilled and talented stream, as well as a stream for people that have been working in South Australia. Have you been resident there for 12 months at this stage?
No, I'm living here for 7 months.
7 months, okay. You're pretty close.
I plan to apply for another student visa in order to extend my time here, and also give me more time for that visa.
Yeah. And look, I mean,
I need a skill assignment, and I'm starting with skill assignment through Betasis.
Yeah.
Right. But okay, I don't know if I can.
Yeah, and look, I'd say you could still possibly be able to do it. If you look at the numbers on that table that I shared with you previously, even though South Australia is one of the smaller states, it does have a disproportionately higher quota than other states. I think it's higher than Queensland, and Queensland is a larger state. So I mean, I think we could keep our minds open about it. I mean, I'd like to know more about your situation, if that's okay. And, with your permission, if you want to send me through your resume, I'm happy to have a look at it and give you some advice around, whether it's a realistic proposition for you.
Okay.
Yeah, Vera's got a really good profile.
Okay. Yeah, sounds like it.
She, after trying really hard for 3 months, she got a job in a hospital in Adelaide.
Yeah, but not as a theater technician. It's as a sterilization attendance. So it's in another area, but it's really similar. Yeah,
but very similar. And you managed to get a job in a hospital, which is amazing. And you'd only been there for 7 months, and she's studying English. And that's another thing that I meant to ask you, because obviously a lot of people want to apply, like Vero, want to do that state nomination. And what I always say to them is that they need to have a valid visa whilst they wait. So how long, because it could take a long time to get that approval, right?
Yeah, well, look, to make an application for a 491 visa, like, that's an invitation-driven visa, so we can't just unilaterally apply for it. We have to be invited to apply for it. So say, hypothetically, Vera had another substantive visa, was invited, and then we applied for the 491 visa. You'll then get a bridging visa, which will allow you to stay here whilst that application is being processed. But we can't apply for a 491 visa if we don't have another substantive visa in Australia, other than, say, bridging visa A, B, or C in the circumstances. So, even if it takes a long time, that's okay, provided we get the invitation and apply for the visa whilst we hold another visa. That's what's really important.
Yeah.
And I think, having a strategy and knowing when we need to go with the strategy is really important, and not letting time get away from us. It's always really important, for everyone here listening, that we have a plan B to fall back upon. We're all about having definitely a really good plan A, but a good plan B sometimes, and even plan C is important, so that we can protect, your capacity and your interests to stay here as well. So I think everyone's here today with a view to being able to stay longer term, and that's a really good sign of being committed. And where we make a plan, it's important that we follow through on it, so that we do things at certain stages so that we're able to protect your interests, that you can stay in the country.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Vero?
Sí, no, o sea, la pregunta puntual, por ahí vos la podés acomodar, es que dentro de esa skill, higher skill, dice and talent, o sea, como y talento. Y dentro de todo ese despliegue dice que como que tengo que darle algo a Australia. Pero yo no sé si eso me entra, los años de experiencia me entran como higher skill o tengo que hacer, no sé, otra cosa. No sé si yo entraría en eso, por eso te digo, pero por lo que veo, debería que sí, pero...
So apparently, Richard, in the program the South Australia program, it mentioned something on higher skills and talent. So what Vera wants to know is if her previous work experience will be considered in that for that program. Yes, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm assisting someone at the moment that has really incredible experience from overseas. They don't quite meet the residency requirements to go into the other stream in South Australia at the moment, so we're definitely able to proceed with the highly skilled and talented stream in South Australia based on your whole work experience. In fact, we can proceed with overseas applicants for that cohort, so that's completely fine. Yeah, and I'd like to have a look at your situation in more detail. So it's up to you. But if you want to reach out, send your resume. I'd love to have a look at it and give you some advice on it.
Okay, perfect. Yep.
Dale.
Yes. Thank you.
Excelente. Maga, ¿qué vas a preguntar?
No, soy yo.
They're my students and friends. I have to call them friends. I have to call them friends now, but she's also my student. My student.
Dela, yo por ahí ¿puedo aportar una cosa?
Sí.
Que nosotros, como dice Richard, cada caso es particular y ahí yo puse las direcciones para contactarnos. Nuestra web es siempre la misma, es www.richardtimpson.net. Digo porque el apellido Timpson es muy fácil de confundirse con Thompson y hay otros Timpson también, entonces como que es un apellido bastante común. Pero lo que sí yo iba a decir que es muy importante y también va a servir para Vero si ella quiere tener una consulta, es cuando nos manden los emails, es importante que nos pongan que son tus estudiantes, entonces nosotros contextualizamos de dónde viene el contacto y sería ideal para ahorrar un paso que ellos nos envíen la mayor cantidad de información posible, sea currículum, por
Ahí no sé si soy yo o si
No,
se
no
cortó.
se escucha nada.
Sounds like
okay.
you got cut off there.
You got cut off, yeah.
No me la conté.
Pero sí, lo que estaba diciendo Lisa es que cuando les manden la información para hacer el assessment, es muy importante que pongan en detalle los estudios que tienen y la experiencia laboral para que Richard pueda ver bien el perfil, porque de otra manera es muy complicado. O sea, es muy importante cuando lo contacten que le manden cuanta más información posible, que es como el currículum. O sea, lo más importante es los estudios que tienen y la experiencia laboral, fuera y dentro de Australia. Okay, we'll go quickly so that I'll just a few more questions so I can let you go. Nadia, decime.
Te hablo en español. Sorry, Richard, my English is terrible, so I want to speak in Spanish.
Sounds good to me.
I am Nadia. I'm sorry for my English. Okay, in Spanish is better for me. La pregunta es fácil, Vela. ¿Qué camino seguir? Porque yo tengo el estudio de enfermería y el estudio de...
¿Vos querés saber cuál de los dos lados te conviene más?
Y bueno, no puedo ir a Tasmania, ya sé, porque Maga está feliz, porque no hay muchos cupos y anoté otros lugares que tienen muchos cupos, pero bueno, ¿qué camino?
Vos lo que querés saber es por qué profesión te conviene ir.
Cortita, sí, por favor, eso.
Okay, Richard, okay, so Nadia is both a physical education teacher and a nurse.
Wow.
She likes studying, okay? So,
yes.
So, and she's a very good soccer player.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
That is true.
So what she would like to know is, which obviously again is a very general question, but based on your knowledge and your experience, what she would like to know is, should she follow, because she's now studying English.
Yeah.
She probably needs another 6 months of English to get that. She actually she speaks English, but she feels like she doesn't. But what she wants to know is, should she follow the pathway of education or health? She's at the Gold Coast. They love the Gold Coast and they want to be able to stay here, but they're open to other options. So I think she should go for education, but she wants to know, obviously we know that the country now is all about health professionals, blah, blah, blah. Well, I know it's a very general question, with a very general answer, but what would you say based on what you're seeing right now in Australia?
So look, can I just ask one question before I answer that? Yeah, so have you made any applications to ANMAC or anything like that for your nursing qualifications to be recognized?
No, she hasn't.
Okay. So look, there are definitely options from an education point of view, but every case is different. But in a general sense, if you look at the invitations that are coming through for the 189 visa program, for example, there's definitely a huge focus from a government perspective in terms of seeking to attract and keep health-based professionals in Australia. I think the answer to your question will really depend on to what extent your qualifications in nursing are recognized here as such, because if it's the case that you're able to get those qualifications recognized relatively easy, there's so many more nursing type occupations that are suitable from a visa perspective as opposed to education. Now, education, there's some really good options in education as well, but which way you proceed, I think in a general sense, health is a really attractive area to be in. It just comes down to really how easy it would be for you to get your qualifications recognized here.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I mean, I think, no one's saying that you have to work in health. It's just, if there's scope for us to proceed with an independent, temporary or permanent skill-based option on the basis of getting, an expression of interest in as a nurse, with a skills assessment from ANMAC or something like that, there's so many more options that are open to us in that case. Yeah, sorry.
If she did the diploma, the nursing diploma, which is very popular at the moment, can she then apply for a postgraduate visa? Can she nominate nurse even though it's a vocational course? Because that's a question that many students ask me, because there's so many people. Most of my students that work in health are going either for individual support to go for the easiest, cheapest option. But many of them are interested in the nursing diploma. So after the 2-year nursing diploma, they are entitled to apply for a postgraduate visa. A graduate visa.
Yeah, absolutely. It just, so look, but what I would say is that could be a really, really good option. But what I would recommend that we do in this case, it's up to you. I mean, if you really want to pursue education, that's a really good option as well. But I've done lots of applications for nurses previously where we make an application to the Nursing and Midwifery Board with respect to asking them for a determination as to the relevance of the qualifications here. And they will come back to us and say, oh, we only need to do a part of the diploma, or we only need to do a few subjects on the diploma. It might just make more sense where we can reduce down the amount of time that we might necessarily need to do as a means of converting. Depending on where you got your qualifications from, we might need to do, more or less of that course. Sometimes for different countries, they've got to do everything, but other countries, it's quite limited in terms of what we would need to do. But there is a process that we can go through where they would pretty much tell us, what do you need to be able to get registered here with APRA as such, So if you can get registered with APRA, then that constitutes as a skills assessment as a nurse for the purposes of you know, a 189 application or something like that, you know. So I guess that's probably where I would go with it first, just to see, you know, to what extent they would recognize you at present.
And obviously for any health option, you kind of need a 7.0 in IELTS. Even to be admitted for the diploma, you still need a 7.0 in IELTS. So I guess for her, getting up to speed with her English would be a major thing, I guess.
Yeah, and look, I mean, that's a really good point. But obviously, you know, you say her English is really good anyway. I don't know. I mean, I think we need to back ourselves as well to a certain degree and say we can do this. But like definitely for nursing and for medical occupations, there is that additional requirement in terms of English, which is a little bit higher. So we just need to be aware of that. I mean, I think for education as well, there is a higher English language requirement as well in terms of
also 7.0. And obviously, and they need to go through the process. It's the same case. You would advise the same thing. They need to have that qualification recognized in Australia.
Yeah. I mean, I think, look, depending on how close you are to the expiry of a visa, it just makes sense to have a look at it just to see what you might need to do to get your skills recognized here. Because, you know, before we embark upon an extra 2 years, like that might be really amazing in terms of the educational outcome. It might just be important for us to see what exactly do we need to do to take into consideration what we have studied previously overseas. And then we'll know exactly what we need to do, and then we can make some decisions around that.
And I think it's time. I guess what you need in Australia most of the time is time. Like for instance, I've got students that just got the visa granted. I can see a few online that know about that case. That's why I'm saying it. But she's a pharmacist, and she went through the whole recognition process. And I extended the visa with a very cheap, not very important vocational course, because she just needed time to get that pharmacist process going. And in 2 years, which was what lasted her student visa, she got her PR in Western Australia. She just did. So I guess it's the same thing, like you say. Sometimes to get that recognition, it takes a long time, or it could take 6 to 12 months. And sometimes you need to study something that will allow you to be legally in the country. And also, it depends on your profile, whether you could just study anything, or whether you need to study something that's it's related to what you're doing to get additional points and stuff like that. So I guess it's the same case with teachers. I know there's many of the people connected are teachers and work in education, and I guess it's the same thing. They need to have that qualification recognized. Okay. So Agustin.
Yes. Hi, Richard.
Hi, Agustin. How are you?
Fine, and you?
Good, thank you. Yeah, really good.
Okay, quick question. I am married. My wife is here actually studying English. I am the parasite here working. And my question is, if, for example, I apply for a sponsorship or a nomination, I need something to take in consideration about my wife, for example, for put her in some application. In some moment, I read something about the nominations, sort of a nomination. I need to be single for apply, for example. I know if is this true, or it depends on the case.
So if you need to be single to be nominated, is it?
Yeah, or for be a sponsored, sorry.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. So you can be single, of course, but you can most definitely include family unit members in that application. So, you know, if, for example, you were sponsored, you can include a spouse or a de facto partner in that sponsored application, as well as some children as well who are dependent. So you can definitely include other people in that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.
Good. Laura from Sydney.
¿Cómo estás, Bella? Hi, Richard. Sorry,
Hello.
my English is bad, so I speak Spanish. Bella, no sé si te acuerdas, nosotros somos los dos técnicos en higiene y seguridad.
Sí, obvio.
Mi pregunta es, no sé si me dejas compartir, para validar mi carrera, yo ¿Puedo aplicar con el título técnico? No sé si se ve ahí.
A ver, le voy a preguntar, porque tengo muchos casos. So I've got many students that are work health and safety professionals.
Yeah.
With in Argentina, it can be a tertiary degree or a bachelor's degree. Can they proceed with a pathway here in Australia with that occupation, like work health and safety, even though the rules are completely different? That's in a way what Laura wants to know. Like,
yeah,
can she do the whole recognition process? Is it?
So there are Bella, similar occupations. I mean, obviously the rules are very different, but there is a process for someone with that background to have their skills assessed here in Australia and to look to proceed with options on that basis. I should say that there isn't a requirement, in most cases on a 482 visa, if that's the way that we were to proceed in this case, to have your skills assessed. We really only need to do skills assessments for 491 visas, for 190 visas and things like that. For the 482 visa, it's generally the case that most applicants from Latin America, with the exception of Brazil, I think, don't need to do a skills assessment. So, yeah. So, but look, yeah. I mean, like, there's occupations on the various lists that are relevant for the purpose of that occupation. It comes down to the extent of your experience and your qualifications overseas. So I'm really happy to look at your resume if you wanted to send it through and to have a discussion about it, just to see what specific occupations we could potentially connect you with,
Sí, yeah, I'll just say it's explained in Spanish. Yo
Yeah,
creo que, Lau, en tu caso, como en el caso que hay varios que nos están conectados, mucha gente, se puede, o sea, sí, vas a tener que hacer un skill assessment, porque obviamente las reglas son completamente distintas, pero creo que sí, definitivamente es un caso bastante específico que creo que lo mejor va a ser que hagas un assessment bien con él, o sea,
Claro.
con cualquiera, pero tenés que hacerlo, porque no es como una carrera tan fácil como por ahí como, no sé, maestra o un ingeniero, porque obviamente que las reglas son completamente distintas, entonces definitivamente vas a tener que hablar en manera más detallada con él.
Perfecto. Yo porque en este caso, viste que decía que el título, si no es altamente relevante, digo altamente relevante que no es una licenciatura. Sí, sí, por eso era mi duda, pero...
Él lo que está diciendo es que no importa, o sea, lo importante es ver, o sea, tiene que chequear con tu experiencia laboral, porque dice que hay varias ocupaciones que se asemejan a lo que vos hiciste, que se puede llegar a ir por esa ocupación. Y en base a la ocupación más relacionada a lo que vos hiciste, los requisitos que vayas a tener que cumplir.
Perfecto. Ay, gracias. Ah.
Dale. Ok, Muriel. We only have a few more. Muriel from Sydney as well.
Hello, how are you?
Hi, really well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. Hi, Bella.
Good.
¿Cómo andás?
Muy bien. I just want to ask you, because it's always good to listen someone who knows. I am a physiotherapist.
Okay.
Yes, with 15 years, but in my country, in Argentina.
Yeah.
And only 6 months working here in a wellness center in City Cave. I want to know which path should I do? What can I do? We thought with Bella in apply for another visa, student visa. Of course,
Okay.
because I need time, because I've already talked with the physiotherapist council, and the skill assessment process will maybe take almost 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got many students that are physios.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you've had many clients in that area.
Absolutely.
So what could you say? What options do they have?
Yeah,
You
look,
have?
so it's exactly the same thing that you said previously, Bella. So in a sense, if you
have
are
to be in APRA.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're able to get registration, either through mutual recognition or through a process that you go through from a visa perspective, there's a whole range of really significant options that you would have if it's the case that you're able to get to that point. So I guess what's really important is understanding how easy or difficult it's going to be for you to get through a skills recognition process and how long that is going to take. But obviously the difficulty is, what do we do in the meantime to keep you here for the purposes of that? And there could be a whole range of different options, and it's obviously something that you and Bella can discuss in relation to having some interim options or a bridge to keep you here while that process is taking place. But I mean, if you're able to get registration as a physiotherapist, there would be an array of different visa options for you. It could also be the case that based on your experiences, different occupations that we can look at rather than going through that process as well. So there's different non-physiotherapy occupations that we could potentially look at that could be relevant for you based on your skills and experience, where you might be interested in working in something that's connected to physiotherapy, but might not be working as a registered physiotherapist as such. So, it's about knowing all of the options and then making a decision in terms of, is further study what's required? I mean, that's always really valuable. Or is there employment options open for you at the moment on the basis of, maybe the wellness center that you're working in? So, yeah, I mean, I'd love to see your resume similar to everybody else, and, maybe come up with a strategy for you and see what we can do,
Yes, I will.
Yeah,
Richard, I will send you.
Yeah.
Thank you for this.
Thank you. Yeah.
Vamos, Muri, vamos que se puede, Muri.
Gracias.
Okay, I'll go. A Nancy ya le respondí, no entendí la pregunta de la hija. Nancy, si querés escribirme en el costado, no sé a qué te referiste con tu hija, pero sigo mientras con Agus, Lorenzo.
Ay, acá estoy, sorry. Me agarraste desprevenida, sorry. Good evening, Richard. I'm gonna try to make this short. I'm 38, so I'm old.
No, you're not. I'm almost 39.
I'm not in the same track. Okay, I have worked 15 years in a bank. I ended up as a kind of manager. I launched my skills assessment last week for, I study public relations. Was 3 years to study back then, 20 years ago. And right now I need Bella to get me another visa, so I need to buy time to stay here. I'm not sure if there's anything we can do with my skills assessment if it gets accepted as a public relations. I'm the one working in Gold Coast Private Hospital.
She's the one I told you that
that's me.
Wants to do the chef course now.
Oh my God, no.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't really want to, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to stay here.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I'm pretty lost.
Yeah. When does if you don't mind me asking, in front of the group, when does your visa expire?
December the 6th.
Okay. And when you made the application, was it last week? From a skills assessment perspective, was it to VETASES?
It was VETASES. Yes, exactly.
Okay. And did you pay for escalated processing, or how did you?
I honestly don't know. I pay like 1,000 something.
Yeah. Okay. It sounds like you. Yeah. Okay. You might have. I'll need to check that.
Did I?
Okay. Yeah. So look, I mean, in a general sense, there could be options for you from a visa perspective. The issue would be that you don't necessarily need to have a skills assessment if it's the case that there's scope, for example, to do an employer-nominated application. Is there scope, or might there be scope for you to get sponsored by the health service district that you work with?
I ask, but I don't see a bright future in that.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
Honestly, no. My hopes are not with it.
Yeah. So look, I mean, what I think you're doing with Bella is really, really good. So it's really important to have, some process or a capacity to stay here in the meantime. So if that's through another course, I think that's really sensible to look at something in that respect. I think there would be other options for you from a longer term perspective, but obviously what we need is probably time in which to achieve those things. So, similar to everybody else, I would need to look at your situation
Yeah,
and
definitely.
see what is workable for you. And I think, working with Bella in the meantime would be really important in terms of having, a plan B just to fall back on for, maybe 6 months to a year or something like that, to be able to stay whilst we can sort something else out. But
yeah, because what she's worried is that because obviously she made it to an advanced level of English.
I
Yeah.
started to
Obviously,
finish. Yeah.
she doesn't need she doesn't really need to continue studying English.
Yeah.
And obviously doing a master's degree, it's more expensive. So, but it will give her because she said to me, I'll do the cookery course. And I said, do you really want to do the cookery course?
Yeah.
But obviously, if she does a cookery course for 2 years, it will be, say, $17,000. If she does a master's degree, it will be $38,000. In one, she'll have 2 years, and in the other one, she'll have at least 3 years postgraduate. But what she really wants to know now is, is she able to continue with her previous background from back home, or does she reinvent herself and do something completely different? What I was saying to her was, you need to do something that you're gonna like, because even if you do the chef course, you're gonna have to work in those 2 years for 1,750 hours with what you study. So you need to kind of like what you do. I also suggested maybe getting her husband to study English, because it will be good for him, whilst in the meantime she does all her paperwork. But I guess what she wants to know, but I guess she'll have to talk to you directly, and you need to assess her profile.
Yeah, and look, your husband's situation could be really important as well, because he may have options separately as well. So I'd like to look at everything, and I can look at it really quickly and tell you, whether there are options based on what you've done from back home, or whether we need to reinvent ourselves. I mean, I think given your visa is about to expire, in less than 2 months, it's good to have an option. What sort of time do you need, Bella, to be able to proceed with something like that, or when do we need to know by?
Well, her visa expires, when was it? December, right?
December the 6th. So I pretty much need to decide if I either study something related or that looks a little bit like what I was doing, or start something new, even if it is to buy
time. Yeah, I get it. Yeah. And so Bella, I mean, starting November, is that too late to get a COE at this stage, or?
Oh, no, it's all right. I mean, we can, mid-November, as long as we got a COE mid-November, and I can apply for a visa before the 6th, so it's plenty of time. She still has, in a way, she's got a couple of weeks. She's got the whole of October, I guess, to decide. Still. Yeah,
definitely. And I mean, like, from my perspective, it's not that I'm sitting on the fence with it. I really just need to look at your background in a lot of detail. So I'd really love to see your resume. I'd love to see your husband's resume as well. And I'm really focused on, the qualifications that you've got here as well as from back home for both of you. And, I'll give you an honest assessment with respect to what I think your options will be based on studies here and experience in studies from overseas. And then you can make some really informed decisions at that point.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
And I know she's going to make it, because you have no idea how much she has achieved since she got here. She got here by herself, leaving her child and husband in Argentina for a few weeks, which was really hard. But she's achieved a lot. So she's a star. I know she's going to be able to make it. So anyways, I think she'll have to talk to you to see her options. I'll quickly finish with Erika. Sebastián, si quieres hacer tu pregunta en escrito para ver si te puedo responder yo o si te responde Richard. We'll finish with Erika, and because Mariano, they've got a lot of opportunities at the moment. So I guess you go ahead and ask.
Hi Richard, how are you? I'm going to
I'm really well.
So make the question in English. I hope you understand me.
You sound perfectly clear to me.
My English is not so good. I hope you understand me. And the thing is, we live here in the Gold Coast with my girlfriend, and I started working as a drafter. Now I'm assistant of project manager. So I'm an architect. I hope I'm going to ask to my boss I hope you give me the sponsorship this week.
Yeah.
So the thing is, I can validate my degree as an architect, as a project manager. I think it's easier than architect.
Yeah. I mean, I would say it probably is. But if you can get sponsorship from your employer, is that not an easier way of dealing with it?
I don't know. I don't ask
Yeah.
him.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm going to tell him this week, you have to give me the sponsor, because it's,
and it's their prerogative. So
in 7 months, like a drafter and assistant of project manager is a huge step. So I hope he give me the sponsorship. I don't know if the company is a big company, give a sponsor. I don't know, but how long I have to apply before my visa expires for a sponsorship?
So do you mind me asking in front of everybody when your visa expires?
February.
February. Okay. So technically, provided you make an application on the day before your visa expires, you can stay then on the basis of a bridging visa whilst the application is being processed. I don't recommend you do that, but provided you make an application before your current visa expires, you'll be able to stay on the basis of a bridging visa whilst your application is being processed.
It's better if I do it right now.
Well,
my English, my IELTS.
Don't do it. I mean, don't do it on the last day. I think if you're proceeding with a sponsorship, there's things like the employer would need to advertise the position. It can take usually a month to 6 weeks in which to prepare it properly and all that sort of thing. So, but English is a super important consideration, no matter what we do. And English is, as I said previously, like a time of decision requirement for a 482 visa, if that's the way we proceed with it.
Yeah. And if the best case, my boss give me the sponsorship.
It kind of
validate my degree like a project manager.
Yeah, and I think, from your perspective, and what I tell people is that it's not sensible to reduce all of your options down to one option. It's good to have a couple of different things going so that if the employer says no, obviously you've got other things then to fall back upon. Because the thing with an employer arrangement is that it ties you in to working with an employer for a period of time. And that may be completely fine, but it's better sometimes if you can do things independently as well. So, I mean, what I'd like to do, with your permission, if you're happy for me to do it, I'm happy to look at your resume and just talk to you about the prospects of getting through a skills assessment, either in architecture or for construction project management. And I think, there's nothing wrong with having that conversation with your employer, but at the same time, getting your skills looked at, just to have a plan B, because what you could do technically is that if they agree to proceed and nominate you for a 482 visa, there's nothing stopping you from doing a separate independent process to get permanent residency of your own accord, and that way you could finish with the employer quicker as well, So, I don't know if you understand the metaphor, but like it's a few different irons in the fire, So
Mariano was able to get a job after a month or so of getting here. He actually went for another job within the company, and then he got the job that he got. So he managed to get things pretty quickly. Again, another example of achieving what he wanted, and he's moving pretty far, pretty fast. But I guess he needs to talk to his employer to see if he's able to, get that sponsor visa going. And I guess he's still got time. His visa expires in February, but I guess as soon as possible, he needs to talk to his boss to see what options he's got, if he's able to do something with the employer or not. I guess that's the most important thing.
Yeah, definitely. And, it sounds like that you're, very highly qualified, and that's really amazing. And hopefully that will give you a few options, whether it's in draft person or whether it's something else,
Yes. Thank you so much, Richard. I'm going to send you my
Cool.
degree so you can guide me.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you so much.
Just one last thing, Richard, before letting you go.
Yeah.
So for every occupation to be able to apply for a sponsored visa, say like they need to have the skill assessment done?
No. So it depends on which visa program we're talking about. So if we're proceeding with an independent or state-sponsored pathway, it's an absolute requirement to have a skills assessment in those. But for an employer-nominated pathway, other than a 494 visa, there's only a very restricted number of occupations that need a skills assessment. So if we're proceeding with a 482 visa, which is the most popular and commonly used employer-nominated visa, there's generally a very small number of occupations and nationalities that need to have a skills assessment for that program. So I guess what I'm saying in a very roundabout sense is that for the 482 program, it's generally not a requirement to have a skills assessment.
Not a requirement.
Yeah.
Okay, because I've got a student, Marcos, he's in Adelaide now. He's a pharmacy technician.
Okay. Yeah.
Doing a pathology course to try to do something related to what he studies. And I guess they want to know, they're in Adelaide, and they want to know if he needs the skill assessment or not. But I guess for the 482, no.
Yeah, and is he from Argentina?
Argentina.
Yeah, so Argentinians might like this, but I think the only country in Latin America that is required to do a skills assessment is Brazil. So it's
is or isn't?
That is required. Argentinians are not required to do a skills assessment for a 482.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
so something at least something positive.
yeah. And I don't know why that is, but for 482s, it's generally the trade occupations for applicants from a very restricted number of countries that need to do skills assessments. Generally, Argentinians don't need to, and most other people from Latin America.
Cool. Perfect. Well, and
So
I guess in regards to Vera's question, you'll have to check with the hospital to see if they do sponsor, because it's a public hospital. So I guess you'll have to check with them whether they are able to sponsor visas or not. I've got a student that got a sponsor working for a hospital in Canberra. So I guess, and in regards to Sebastian's question, you do need the work experience. I guess you need a two-year work experience. He's in the same situation as the other student I told you. The employer wants to sponsor his visa, but he's never worked in the occupation where he's working now. Okay,
so and I guess, does he have any qualification that is relevant to No. Okay.
But I guess maybe it's better if he talks to you directly, I guess.
Yeah, and look, I mean, don't stress too much about it, because there is actually another visa that we can look at where someone doesn't have the experience. There's a visa to allow someone to get experience. That's another option. It's a 407 visa. So like, where we don't have experience or qualifications, there's other things we can do. So, don't be disheartened if you think that you don't have experience. There's always a solution, so.
Oh, so 407, they need to talk to you about that one.
Yeah.
You got that secret weapon at the end of the conversation. That's good.
Yeah, sorry, I probably should have dropped that in an hour ago. But
that's okay.
Yeah, so we can get a 407 for 2 years and then transition from a 407 to a 482 and then go from a 482 to a 186. That's fine. Yeah.
Cool. And un año de project. Hola, mi profesión. Aplico un año de project manager. Yeah, there's more people that maybe they're engineers or architects and they do project management. But I guess those are more specific questions. I guess the most important thing is try to get that work. Try to work in your occupation here in Australia. Yeah. To sum up, I guess we could say that English. Try to work in your occupation and try to get that employer to want to sponsor your visa in a way, right? In simple terms.
Yeah, definitely. And look, get some advice around your situation so that you make the right decisions in terms of what you can do. It's a really good time to be in Australia at the moment in terms of visas. There's a lot of new things opening up and happening. So, hopefully we can come up with some really good solutions for everyone here.
Cool. So I'll just quickly say something in Spanish and then I'll say goodbye. Sebastián comunicate con el contacto que dio ahí Richard, porque hay una visa que se llama, es la 407, que es una visa donde te permite, si vos estás trabajando en un área y no tenés la experiencia, esta visa te permite poder aplicar y conseguir esa experiencia laboral a través de esta visa. Así que hay algunas opciones, pero tenés que hablar directamente con él. Así que lo mismo para todos, hay casos muy específicos. Creo que el resumen de la charla, lo más importante, que es lo que todos quieren, que es conseguir esa skill visa para poder salir de la visa de estudiantes, el inglés, tratar de trabajar en su profesión acá en Australia, o lo más parecido a su profesión, y entablar una buena relación con ese empleador para que su empleador quiera sponsorear su visa. Si no está registrado, el proceso no es complicado, se puede hacer rápidamente, así que hay opciones. Creo que lo más importante es eso. Y bueno, cualquier pregunta que quieran hacer más específica para que Richard analice su perfil, ahí Lisa dejó el contacto en la barra de mensajes. Así que nada, seguramente organizaremos alguna otra charla antes de fin de año cuando haya estas novedades que se espera que sean muy positivas. I'm just saying, Richard, that maybe we'll get you back on once we have what happens, the information of what's going to happen in the next 2 months.
Yeah,
the good
definitely.
news,
Yeah.
but I'm just telling everybody that contact you so that you can assess their own case and see what options they've got. So
Absolutely.
I'm just getting them to, So thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure.
Loved listening to you and all the information and knowledge that you've got.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for your time.
Great, thank you. And thanks everyone for listening to me.
Cool. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Gracias, chao.
Chao. Y yo voy a dejar grabado el Zoom, lo voy a dejar grabado, así que no se preocupen que lo voy a subir después a YouTube para que en caso que quieran volver a escuchar, puedan escucharlo, pero bueno, me parece súper positivo, me parece que a no desesperar, que hay mucho que se puede hacer. Así que bueno, besos, buenas noches, chao, chao.